times prior. In both of those conversations, I think that there was a discussion that I was doing a lot of the presenting, and I was doing a lot of the discussing about what the MOU was and what the MOU's purpose was for Merit. The ongoing concern is that the board needs to have a discussion between the board themselves. And while I'm ex officio to the board, I don't sit on the board. And so it's really important that the board take the time to contemplate and discuss among themselves the value of the MOU or the value of Merit without the superintendent's guidance or without the superintendent's being involved in that discussion, because really it's your vote on your discussion around the memorandum of understanding. Okay. So that being said, backing up to the concept of the memorandum of understanding, the MOU was established with council to address the fact that previously Merit had submitted an application in the previous year, as well as it had gone through the application conversations with the DAP and had staff comment provided on the previous application in the previous year. Council has advised that the MOU was a reasonable action that the board could take to approve the Merit charter application to bring them from being a contract school to being a charter school. That is a concept that is not contemplated in law, and that is that the contract school doesn't have a lot of provisions around contracts. It's a new concept. It doesn't have a lot of descriptors around it. But the belief or the discussion by council was that the board was well within its rights to approve coming from an existing going concern or an existing school as a contract school coming to being a charter school. So really the discussion is tonight is once again that the board is going eyes wide open into the discussion of a memorandum of understanding approving Merit as a charter school with the board's discussion, which will conclude in a vote one way or the other on the approval of the charter school. What this does not do is describe the provisions of a charter school and the relationship that is going to be then completed, really is almost complete, with the contract of what the performance of the charter school needs to be described. So you're approving the charter school as a concept, as an entity, and the details of what that charter school is obligated to fulfill is in a later approval of the contract itself. We're glad to take any questions or the board to debate the legitimacy of Merit as a charter school. Could we continue?
I do have a question, Dr. Neal. When you came up with the idea of the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, to streamline a process that had already been reviewed, have you had experience in that in the past, and what was the motivation for streamlining it
Sure.
in this way?
We took counsel from both John Stanek and Brad Miller, both of whom suggested that the most expeditious way, because the charter school was already in contract status, was for the board to approve an MOU. The board's continual wish or continual communication with my office was that time was not needed to extend that process, that the board really needed to convey an approval or the board really needed to convey a desire for the Merit school to exist within the district as a chartering authority. I've chartered a lot of schools. The MOU concept was one that the attorneys and I talked about as a expeditious way to go through let Merit know that they were approved. Let Merit know that they were within the bounds and the pleasure of the board. That the details of how the school was going to be functioning could and should be detailed later in the contract. It was for the sake of the board's expressing, we want this charter school in our district.
Now, a question that I have is, there were some concerns from the previous review by the previous board in regard to things like lunches, busing, special education, those sorts of topics. This MOU, does it address that, or those issues are addressed in the actual contract itself?
The MOU does not address previous concerns. The contract itself will.
So this is just a pathway to, since all of those issues have been discussed, this is a pathway to the contract and then from the contract to the lease. Is that correct?
There's no connections from the contract to the lease. The lease is a standalone discussion, all due respect, but the contract itself is its own response to this MOU. That is correct. The board will have a later discussion about lease and facilities and all of that when we receive the information from Cooperative Strategies about the, Miles, what is it called? Feasibility study. Thank you, sir. So tonight in executive session, the board will spend a couple hours talking about the contract with Merit. But that will be in response to the MOU that the board will need to go through and approve.
So we're going, and we're not starting it over, because it has like a date on it. There's a 90-day window for negotiating a contract, but we'd be...
You would be technically starting it over.
Okay. So it'd be, they have a new 90-day date on it?
It unfortunately would have a new 90-day date on it.
Okay. And Superintendent, as you expressed, the MOU was something that you proposed to the board and legal counsel after a previous public meeting where the board had expressed the sense that we wanted as much of a streamlined and expeditious process in the consideration of Merit's charter application, right?
Correct. This was a council-approved pathway to accelerating the approval of Merit. So again, hey Superintendent, how can we get this done? It can be done through an MOU. Does council agree? Yes, council agreed.
Okay. But I mean, it was your idea, you proposed it, and council agreed?
I proposed it as a solution and council agreed.
And board agreed?
And the board agreed previously.
We voted on it twice previously.
That's correct. This will be the third vote of this board on that. And I think I probably should step away and allow the board to discuss the legitimacy of it.
What I would say to the board is, as we know, we've discussed Merit and the MOU and the process almost ad nauseum. And you know, one of the things that we need to be aware of with the MOU is that, as Matthew was talking about, it was a slightly different process because there's a process set up, a law for approving a charter school. And in this case, Merit had already gone through the charter application. In the previous year, they had been denied by the Board of Education. I think it was in December of 2020 was the final vote on that. And when we came into office and we started discussing this, I specifically remember, like Gary, you had commented about like why go through the whole thing again? Why put everybody through that? Not the board, but the necessary work for Merit to redo their application, for the DAC to stand up again, for the administration to take a second look at something they had already seen. And so we talked about bringing in somebody to streamline that process, and we had counsel. I remember it was Tim Farmer was here in one of our December meetings. He went through this process with us, and we talked about that the law about approving charter, the application of the DAC, that really that was designed for charter schools that were not in operation, that only existed on paper as a speculative investment. And also that the law, while setting out policies and recommendations, it does make clear that those are recommendations. It can be waived by the board. It talks about the DAC that if practicable, the DAC will review and make recommendations. But almost everything could be waived except, crucially, there had to be public approval of the charter application. When we talked about the MOU before, I think it was clear that the MOU was the vehicle for approving the charter application. And it would initiate a process where our attorney and Merit's attorney would start up an active contract. And I remember them saying that they were going to take the charter application, and that was going to become the base for the contract to begin with. That was the starting point. I think what we should be clear about in voting on it again is that in approving the MOU, we are approving under the law Merit Merit's charter application and granting them charter status. If someone were to find, if some appropriate court of law were to find that that hadn't occurred properly and that wasn't legally sufficient in previous board meetings. So that should be clear. There's a two-step process. Approving it as a charter, which does bestow benefits and rights on Merit Academy residents if we did not complete a contract. As a approved charter school, Merit can appeal to the state board and try, and if there's a favorable ruling from the state board, bring us back to the negotiating table and things like that. So it's important, I think, that we keep that in mind in casting a vote, whether we're approving it or not, that it is under the law and approval of Merit as a charter school, and it does put certain obligations on us and on them. And so we can't think of the MOU as sidestepping that.
So I have a question then. If we, for some reason, were not to approve it, you clearly said they would be able to appeal it to the state and bring it back to us again, possibly if the state ruled favorably for them.
Not the MOU, David, but the contract.
Oh,
So when you approve a charter school under the law, like you are required to negotiate for the actual charter itself, the contract. And if you can't come to terms, the charter school has the right to appeal it, and the state board has in the past ordered the district and the charter school back to the table. There's an expectation when the charter school is approved under law that a charter will be freezed absent, I think, extraordinary circumstances. But I'm certainly not an expert on it. I'm not providing legal advice. I'm giving you my layman's reading of the law, and of course we've had advice from counsel numerous times. But I think it's important in the public record that we understand when we approve an MOU, it does have the meaning of the law. It does confer rights and obligations on both the district and the charter applicant, and the MOU is doing that. The same as if we had a resolution that said whereas. The important thing is that we are, whether we title it MOU or resolution, it receives a public vote, and we understand that it does have a legal consequence. So, and what I would like to say, further, I'm sorry that I'm occupying the microphone, but I guess everybody knows that I'm a pro-Merit guy, and I have kids in the school, and so I guess I sometimes see myself as a bridge. Did you have something you want to say, Matthew?
When they did this, the other board members had concerns, and do we address those, that they addressed those concerns and they met to our satisfaction?
well, I understand that is in our next meeting.
The next meeting, the contract.
Where we're discussing contracts with our new attorney.
So we can be,
Those, as I understood from previous conversation with the attorneys, that those concerns that the previous board had would be satisfied and expressed in this next contract. At least the ones that are pertinent to meeting the legal requirement of having a chartering the school.
okay.
And I did, I was concerned about that as well.
Yeah.
Some of the things that they said, I was concerned about it, and I understand that they have been met, or there are plans in place to meet
Yes,
these.
because I got from the CORA, obviously, document that addressed those concerns, and I read it, and probably read it. They have a document that they address the concerns, I suppose everybody got it.
Well, my understanding is back when they were denied, they responded.
Yeah, right.
So that's all public record. And I'd like to say that in the course of going through this process, I have reviewed the DAC committee report that was done on the previous charter application. I have reviewed every public comment that was emailed in as part of that application process. I have reviewed the recommendation of the independent expert hired by the previous board in the course of doing that charter application. This has not been a fly-by-night operation by any measure. This is a process that has been going on for over a year, almost continuously. If we look at Merit initially filing a charter application, going through the process set out by our predecessors, then standing up as a contract school in our community, opening its doors, being operational, coming back to us again as a charter applicant, and the process that has been ongoing under our board with Tom Weston, with Brad Miller, with our administration, with Merit's administration, with Merit's council. There's been a lot of that going on, a lot of discussions amongst the administration and Merit's administration. It's been a continuous process. So it has not been, and I mean, we're on month 6, we have a meeting and it's always brought up. So it's been a very in-depth process. It's a process that I have always supported. I campaigned on it because I believe school choice is something that the people of this community not only want, but need. I believe that it is a no-brainer decision. It is a win-win for this district to bring in Merit Academy as a charter school. Everybody knows that our enrollment numbers have been falling off a cliff over the past several years. Merit Academy, by standing up as a contract school, inadvertently contributed to that because children left our district to go to Merit Academy. When children leave our district to go to Merit, they fall off of our rolls and they take the state funding with them. So financially, it has had a negative impact on our district. Moreover, as it operates independently, it operates without the oversight of the community within which it operates, other than its own board, which is drawn from the community. But as a charter board, they would have more oversight from this board as well, which of course, as we all know, for the first time in many years, is elected. So the people can have their say on it. I think that is good for everybody in this community. It's good for the district. It's good for Merit. There are a group of people who think that chartering Merit is just good for Merit. It's not good for the district.
Well, after the meeting we had last night over at Columbine, when I saw, it's a nationwide issue. It's especially a Colorado issue with declining enrollment. So it's just something that's happening nationwide. We didn't hear reasons for it, but it's definitely here. Last night, during Susan Miller's presentation, there was discussion about at some point, we will have to close a school. It's without question, and within possibly 2 schools, and her recommendation will be that one of them would be one of the elementary schools and consolidate, and then the next step would be consolidating the middle school over to a gateway, at least a suggestion of those were some of the options that she had said last night. I think, personally, I'd like to see our kids stay where they're at, and one solution is taking over, cost of the facility is a benefit to the district in itself by bringing those kids into a building and helping to pay the cost of this. And it would take a burden off of the general budget. At least, that's my sense of it. One of the benefits of it.
Well, you can't keep schools open if you don't have students. Merit Academy has students. Those students will come into this school district. They can fill one of our buildings. They can bring funding back to this district. If that's what Susan Miller is recommending, we're not in a position to simply wave our hands and dismiss a group of families because they want to operate under a different sort of curriculum. We have to be welcoming to all of our families. We have to offer school choice. And if there's over 100 kids there, we've lost about 200 kids in the previous year. If we can bring back 150 and 200 kids, we can reverse the decline that has plagued this district and this community for a long time. And now you've got a consultant brought in by the superintendent who's telling you what the fruits of that decline are that we're about to reap. We are in a position where we cannot simply say to families, if you don't like it, leave. We need to be welcoming to families in this community We need to be welcoming to talented teachers and counselors and staff, even if they're in a school that we didn't like their idea to begin with. We're not in a position to be turning people away. So we need to bring people back. And that's how it's a win for this school district. It is a win for both sides. It's quite frankly, it's common sense. It's a no-brainer at this point. And look, I disagree with the decision made by the previous board. I disagree with the process they used. I disagree with the rationale. I disagree with their vote. I've always been open about that. But it's a different decision that we have made, not because it's different board membership. It's a different circumstance entirely. Because the old board, I get it that they were having to speculate and guess on whether what was on paper was going to actually turn into reality. And they were coming out of the COVID shutdown year. There was a ton of uncertainty. They were, having to make educated guesses. We fortunately don't have to make an educated guess about whether Merit could successfully open its doors, could successfully recruit educators, could successfully recruit students. We know they've been able to do that, and they've been thriving. We know they have staff. We know they have students. We know they have a wait list. So it's just an entirely different matter today than it was a year ago. It's not about, well, it looks good on paper, I guess we'll see. So as much as I might have disagreed with our predecessors, I can respect the decision that they made. It would be nice if some of our predecessors could respect that we're making a decision with different facts than they had and take that into account. But we should at least be taking that into account. I'd also like to talk about that one of the reasons we chose and supported the superintendent's idea, or at least I did, the MOU vehicle, was that the other unique circumstance was timing. That, as we all know, the intent to enroll period is upon us. Staff deciding whether to remain somewhere is upon us. And so we all recognized at the time that we just couldn't take another 6 months just going through a process that had already been done. That we needed to work in good faith with an already open school to accommodate both the needs of the district and Merit Academy in terms of being able to successfully plan and budget and get their students in for the following academic year. So that's why I always thought the MOU was, I guess, one of the superintendent's best ideas as far as the 6 months that we've worked together. I thought it was a good idea. I supported it then. I supported it the 2 times we voted for it, and I intend to support it as well tonight.
Let's hear from some of these, from Sue or Chris or Gary.
Yeah, I concur with Director Illingworth. It's not just a dream on a piece of paper. They've been in operation for a year. They've kept families in the community, and our bottom line is the students too. And when we serve the students, we also serve the families, and I think it's good overall for our community. And Colorado is a school choice state. We're trying to bring choices to parents. That's what they have expressed us to do. And in reference to it helps drive our community. And so I concur with what Director Illingworth is saying, and it is correct. We haven't pushed the envelope I need to direct this to the board. I feel we haven't pushed the envelope so fast because we've been ill-advised or taken a risk. It's because if we want to charge, we're going to have to close 1 or 2 schools. And why should we want a school to be empty for a year if this is, and we can't set our schools up for the 22-23 school year or Merit up for success for the 22-23 school year if we don't act upon this now. We've got a lot of work to do. We've gone over the contracts, we've gone over the JAC, we researched the information that we've gotten from the board and Merit Academy, all the information that we feel we need. And it is a push for time because we want this to be successful for the 22-23 school year for both our school, for the Woodland Park School District and Merit, and bringing them in. It has to be done, and it has to be done. We have to make some decisions. They're hard decisions, but our schools, we can afford another year to have the schools half full, or make the decision to close 2 schools down. That's a lot of money to maintain the schools. That could go to teachers' raises, and it could benefit the school district. So I agree with Mr. Elliott.
Well, I agree with Sue and David over here, and we did run on, we're responsible for everybody in the district, all the students in the district, whether they go to, whether they go to the Colorado Springs Christian School, as I understand it, or Merit Academy, we represent all of them. And, everybody's got a different opinion. We're placed in a position where we have to accommodate as many people as we can with our decisions. And I think, as David said, it's a win-win situation. And, we did promise the families who wanted to have a more classical education a choice to have their students go to that classical education school. And, I think we have an obligation to live up to that promise that we made them. And I think this is because it's a win-win situation. I think, as you say, it's a no-brainer. And I would see too much of an objection to it, because we still have to review the contract and ensure that Merit, accommodates everything that we have in that contract and meets the criteria that we set up in the original contract. So we're going to review that again. So this is like a third or fourth review that we're doing. So I think we're doing due diligence and obviously looking at all aspects of this move. Because we've studied, as you said, for 6 months now. In fact, that's pretty much all we discussed for the last 6 months. I would like to get on discussing.
It's certainly been a repeated topic
Yeah.
in public comment. It's certainly not been something that has been sprung upon the community with 24 hours.
And I just like to see it get done so we can go on to other things.
Did you pay? Did you want to answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I have had conversations with the community, and one of the processes for approving an application had to do with just taking in the community's feedback. And so I actually appreciate the opportunity to revisit this. I know some of you are frustrated with the process. I've actually had a fair amount of reflection, not only on what I've been hearing in the community, but also things related to this process of transference of a contract school to a charter school, utilizing an MOU versus the application process that's laid out for us in the school administrative policies, in particular LBD-R. And that's pretty clear, but this, for a charter school to apply for that. But what is not clear is this transfer from contract to charter. That is not clear. In fact, when we had a consultant come in from CSI, Charter School Initiative, he made it very clear to us that this is unprecedented. And that one of the things that he wanted to do was to ensure that in our process of approaching a transfer from a contract school to a charter school, that we did things in, I think the words were, best practice. Because what we were going to do, essentially, was establish precedent. Not only, so this for me has less to do with the viability of Merit as a school. I actually commended them when they brought their application to the board initially. The amount of work that they've put into this, the passion that they've had, the relationships that they've had with members of this community, many of whom I personally know, and I know their kids. And so this is not in any way a question of their commitment or their capacity and actually their competency. This actually, for me, what this has done is it's afforded me the opportunity to revisit my own thoughts related to what precedent are we setting in the state of Colorado. It's one thing for us to be looked at as a district who is providing mentorship and is, 3 steps ahead of most districts when it comes to social emotional well care and wellness for our students, and providing an atmosphere of safety and all of those amazing things. Like, we actually, I'm proud of that. I'm not sure I would be proud of establishing a precedent where we would actually shortcut a process of answering some really big questions that are in this community through an application process that would actually allow the members of this community and ourselves. Like, I'm hearing you say that you've gone over the contract 2 or 3 times. I have not seen the contract.
When I said it wasn't released to the public, so it's out there. People have seen it. It's on the.
This tonight.
Woodland Park Schools.
No. No.
Let me just say this. Let me continue with my.
Don't lie.
My conversation tonight with our new attorney will be the first conversation that I will have with this board about our contract with Merit Academy. I'm just establishing that as truth based on my experience.
Are you talking about the contract or the contract application?
I'm asking you, what contract have you looked over 2 or 3
We
times? I'm
looked at
hearing you
the
talk about
contract
it.
application. There is no contract yet. That's what we're going in to discuss. And we haven't discussed it with her either.
Because in that, I want to be able to answer the big questions of, like, practically. Let's just look at it practically.
Chris, the attorneys have been trading contracts back and forth for months. If you go to the Support Woodland Park Schools website, Matt Kalowski has published one of those draft contracts that he obtained.
Bullshit! You didn't give it to me.
Matt is saying no.
Yeah, tell the
It was
truth.
not given to me.
So all I'm saying is,
Well, it's on the website.
I have not seen it, so that if it's on me, it's on me. So thank you
I'm
for,
just saying it's in the public. I'm not saying it's on you.
I'm just saying that this is the first opportunity I've had to actually have a conversation with you as a board about this.
It's the board's duty, not the public's.
Well, I'm just saying that I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. And if you will allow me to finish my thoughts, please do. I want to know what's best for the Woodland Park School District as an institution. Yes, we could say that every student who goes to Merit is part of our district. We could say that about the students who go to the Colorado Springs Christian School. However, their parents have chosen to have an institution separate from the Woodland Park School District to educate their children. That is their choice. I honor that choice. For us to say that every student who goes to the Merit Academy is like in our district, there's some truth to that. But I would say that the contract that they have, what the Merit Academy has, is not a contract with an organization within our district. And therefore, what we are essentially doing is saying, okay, whatever institution you are contracting with Merit Academy, we will receive, we're saying with this MOU, we will receive you as a charter school within our district, and now let's go through the process. So I'm understanding that. This does not give us the opportunity, however, to answer the big questions pertaining to, in particular, any debt that Merit Academy may have accrued during this last year of their charter or their contract work with this school. I don't know where they stand with that. I would know that if there was an application. I don't know what that is. I don't know if Woodland Park School District is going to be responsible in any way, shape, or form of managing that debt. I don't know that. The answer may be no, absolutely not. I don't know that. So I'm looking forward to a conversation that has to do with like some clarity of what it is that we are actually approving into our district. And so if it is a charter school or a contract school being transferred to charter, and now we go into the process of contract negotiations and so forth, yeah, I understand that completely. But actually the primary concern that I have is that we're setting a precedent in the state based on the legal advice of one individual. And I have not actually heard anyone else tell us. I mean, it would be ludicrous of us if we had like some significant health concerns that we not get a second opinion. It would be important for us and wise for us to actually seek out the counsel of many. We actually sought the counsel of one, the gentleman from CSI, I can't remember his name.
Almost.
And we chose not to listen to his advice. We chose to go with something that was faster. And so here we are, and in retrospect, I suppose we would be further along the road if we had actually taken his advice. So I just think that it's important for us to exercise the kind of wisdom that's not short-sighted. Like honestly, I believe Merit Academy would continue as a contract school, and parents of this region would have the option of allowing their students to be taught at Merit Academy, whether they were a contract school or a charter school this next year.
Yes.
Here, here.
And I believe that that would be a choice that they can make, just like they have the choice to go to CSCS. Now, when you bring the argument about how it will bolster our numbers, it doesn't bolster our numbers, really. There's a pass-through that happens with finances. Yeah, those students are still in our district, they receive state funding, but Woodland Park School District does not actually benefit in any way from that. Even with the numbers, it's just, I mean, that argument doesn't hold for me, to be honest, because I'm seeing it from a clear perspective, in my opinion, that what we actually want to do is we want to create an environment that will be attractive to outside families moving into our district, and not just move numbers around and call that an increase in our numbers. I think that the difference here is that the precedent that we're wanting to set is not only a precedent statewide for what is best practice of transferring a contract school into a charter in a district, but it's also setting a precedent for how we're going to actually do our due diligence and not try to fast track. Because honestly, I think the school's gonna, I don't know their condition. The reason why I don't know their condition is because there was not an application and I've not been privy to it. And so those are my thoughts. And so I've actually considered that this is a really important conversation for us to have. And I've done a lot of reflecting on it. And I've appreciated not only parents from the Woodland Park School District who have voiced their thoughts, support, concerns, but also parents whose students go to Merit Academy who have met with me. And they've also communicated their thoughts and support and even their concerns. And so that being said, I just want to let you know that I think it's important for us as a board to set good precedent using best practice when it comes to transferring Merit Academy from a contract school to a charter school here in this district.
Chris,
Thank you!
now that's common sense.
Chris, I have a question, just one for clarification for myself. When I said revisiting and talking about it, seeing it, I was talking about the MOU, seeing it several times. As far as the contract itself goes, tonight will be the first time that I too have seen it.
Okay. Thanks for that clarity.
So I did, I just want to make that clear. I do have another, but I do
Let me
have,
also-
let me ask-
quickly on that, there has been no distribution of the contract outside of the attorney as well.
That helps me. I just want to ask a very direct question to my fellow board members. Have any of you seen the contract, the draft? It sounded to me like, Mr. Chairman, like you have seen a draft of the contract.
Tell the truth.
I've seen it on public websites. I've seen that it's out there. I haven't-
What?
Where?
I wouldn't mind, that's fine.
Liar.
I'm just curious, because I just want to clarify, not only for myself, but for this community, have there been conversations between any individual board member and Brad Miller related to the contract of Merit Academy? Charles, has anyone had that conversation?
my conversation with Brad was this, that I read earlier tonight, that he was stepping away from it. I have not had conversations other than there were a few questions about the length of the contract, the kind of data sharing program software that would be used. That has been the extent of my conversations.
Have not had one private conversation with Brad Miller.
I've had conversations with Brad here at the board meeting. Do you think there's something inappropriate about a board member getting counsel from the board attorney?
Not counsel, but advising the attorney on what they want to see in the contract. That would actually be a concern of mine if that was happening. And I'm not accusing anyone of that. I'm asking a direct question to this board. Is there anyone who has had a conversational relationship with Brad Miller pertaining to the contract of Merit?
Well, your question goes into matters that are probably talked about in executive session. So it's not appropriate for the board members to discuss confidential communications they've had with the board attorney. That's what the whole point. The attorney.
The executive session is for the board, period, not for a board member. We have not had a board executive session with Brad Miller pertaining to the contract. If you're telling me that you've had executive sessions with Brad Miller pertaining to the contract and that should not be discussed here and now, then take that
Chris,
as...
I'm not saying that. It's ludicrous to suggest you can have an executive session between one board member and an attorney. That's not an executive session. What I'm saying is that the attorney represents the board, and members of the board could communicate with the attorney about matters related to legal advice and their duties as a member of the board.
But
That's
that
confidential
board member has not been assigned by this board as a subcommittee of this board. So if you are doing that, or if anyone is doing that, then they're doing that of their own volition and not assigned by this board as a subcommittee to work with an attorney. So I'm just trying to get some clarity on that because it feels to me, and I know it's a feeling, an intuition, that if we're not careful, we're stepping into terrain prematurely, and this is why precedent is so important for me. And best practice is very important.
I hear your concern.
So I guess,
So the question, just to make it clear on this, there's 3 steps for it. There's this memorandum of understanding where we agree or not to agree that Merit will be a charter school. The second, that it depends on that MOU, that validates that MOU, is the contract that we're going to be discussing later. So 2 completely, in my mind, 2 separate things. Is it 2 separate things? Are you seeing that way, Chris?
I totally see it that way.
So if it's 2 separate things, the questions that I hear being asked are going to be answered in the contract that will take this to the next step. As I understand, the MOU is a gateway on the information and the application that was already given to the board where you served on as well. So you received that application. and review the information and public comment on that as well. Is that correct? I mean, is that true? I just want clarification.
The application that the previous board reviewed and had the DAC review, that precedes Merit Academy becoming a contract school and actually implementing the vision that they've had. So that being said, there's a lot of assumptions that everything that was in that original application is actually being adhered to, or, you know, one of the things that you said that is true is that when Merit Academy became a contract school, they were not under the same scrutiny, I suppose would be a good word, and held accountable in the same way as if they had been chartered. So what assumptions are made then is if we just take their previous application at face value, we're assuming that everything that was written about in that application is actually being applied in practice, in real life. And so I'm not comfortable making that assumption. I would actually want to know more about what is actually happening in a very viable school situation. No doubt, they're working very hard. And a lot of the families in this region are grateful for their work. And so I commend them for that. I just need us to know what's really going on and not assume that because they made an application a year and a half ago, that they're adhering to everything that they said in that application.
And I hear you, because I agree with you. My assumption is that we will find out those answers when we discuss the contract
And I hear that, and we put a tremendous amount of stock on that step in the process, the contract step. And for the sake of best practice, I actually don't want to make those kind of assumptions.
Dr. Neal, haven't you and the admin staff, you have been working with the attorneys from both boards, and you have been working on the contract, so you are knowledgeable of some of the things that maybe didn't, there were concerns from the last board. I mean, you have been working towards.
To answer your question directly, we submitted comments on, again, this is going to the contract and not the MOU that is again, it's part of this discussion. The contract comments that were submitted by Mr. Gustafson and myself, Brad Miller, was done on the 2nd of March or the 4th of March. March 2 was the last time that we reviewed that contract when Brad Miller stepped back and began the transition to Kaplan and Ernst. We again forwarded those comments to Kaplan and Ernst to make sure they were incorporated into tonight's later executive session. So from March 2 till now, we have not provided, let me clarify, we did have a conversation with Kaplan and Ernst on yesterday afternoon as an executive team to discuss topics as well. There's been moments too on that contract, but it's not been a daily, weekly kind of conversation. I think we did an initial review of the contract that Brad had put forward. We also provided Brad an initial CSI contract in the beginning as well to look at and to use as partial templates, along with Tom's last name, Brian, I'm sorry, Tom Weston, to try to help that process along. But it sat with council, and then between council and the Merit team, with Merit attorney as well, Barry Arrington. So some involvement, but I would not categorize it as extensive involvement.
Is there more discussion on the MOU? Not the contract, but the MOU.
I want to respond to something. Chris, you say that Merit chose to leave us and you honor that choice. Right?
Yeah, they had an option of reapplying.
But you recognize that their first choice was to be a charter school in this district, and they applied for that first, right?
That was their first decision as a board.
And you talk about the process, and you're aware that the independent reviewer authorized by your board recommended the board approve them as a charter school, right?
With conditions.
But the recommendation was approved.
And as you're learning, being a member of this board, you can bring in a third-party consultant, but ultimately the decision is the board. It's a decision, and as you said, the board at the time did its best job of assessing the viability of that application. And that individual who, just for the record, that individual who was hired to look through the application did not even reside in the United States and did not have a touch point specifically on what was happening in this community, and we had to take all of that into account. And so while there was stock placed in that report, it was not going to outweigh all of the other points that were referenced for us to deem it viable or unapproved.
So did you vote against hiring that expert in light of the concerns you just expressed?
No.
Or did you vote for hiring that expert?
I don't recall actually a vote for hiring. I believe that was a process that the administration wanted to bring in as many voices as they possibly could to include an outside voice. Just like we were going to use CSI.
And so when you talk about best practices and process, you put Merit through a process that ended with a recommendation that they be approved, and yet you voted against it.
I'm not on trial here. I'm actually not on trial.
Yeah. He tells them when to bang the gavel.
Awarded for each of us individually, but you will not give us the same courtesy about a vote that's public record?
You didn't answer him.
It's a public record. Please, this is a board discussion.
So you have it on public record, how I voted. I'll leave it at that. The process of getting to that vote took many, many months and hundreds of conversations, one of which was with an outside consultant.
And so you voted against a school that you thought wasn't viable, and yet they opened up. So do you admit that that vote was wrong?
I don't admit that, but what I do acknowledge is their tenacity to make something happen.
And so you think it was correct that Merit was not viable?
I stand on my vote, yes.
But they are viable, right? Because they're open, right?
I don't know how viable that is.
It only
don't know.
in a community where you can walk down to the free, fair, public, open school and take a look at it. If only you could do that. But you've never been there, have you? Have you?
Again, this is not about me. If you want to hear about me, that's fine. You can duke it out.
Well, you talk about a process, but you don't avail yourself of the fact that they are over there next to City Market and they're open every day of the week.
And like I said, if they were not approved as a charter in this district, I have full confidence that they would remain a school in this community, and that parents in this community would have the choice to bring their students to Merit Academy contract school.
Well, a process that doesn't lead to a fair option for the school is no process at all. It's a rigged game, it's a con game, and it's beneath the dignity of the voters of this community. This school has gone through a process. They got a recommendation to be approved. They were denied. Despite that, they have come back. They have opened up. They have gone through another process. The MOU has been ratified 2 separate times. We have discussed this endlessly. We've heard endless public comments. And it seems to me that no process will ever satisfy you that they should be a charter school. That's clear from your record voting, that's clear from the process you put in the report, and that's clear from the record that you have continuously made in public meetings at this board, not just tonight.
Anyone else have anything to say about it?
We ready to vote?
Just checking to make sure that conversation has, everybody said everything that they want to say about it. Here is the motion. Whereas Merit previously applied to the district for charter authorization, and whereas Merit was approved as a contract school by E.R. Moses, and whereas Merit now desires to transfer to district authorization as a charter school, and whereas as a contract school, Merit opened successfully in the fall of 2021, Merit asserts that its functions operationally and academically in the manner proposed in the original application as a classical academy. And whereas the parties agree that a pathway involving a brand new application process would, in many respects, be unnecessary and artificial. And whereas the boards of directors of the parties agree that any and all requirements to ensure future success can be included in the resulting charter contract. And whereas because the district staff and community wish to move forward with attention on consequential matters in this time of great pressure and change in public education, the district board wishes to move directly to the contracting phase. Now therefore, in consideration of the foregoing recitals, the parties hereby, 1, establish a period of no longer than 90 days to complete and sign a charter contract for a term of 5 years to begin on July 1st, 2022. And 2, agree that reasonable pre-opening and operating conditions to include finance, staffing, exceptional student services, enrollment, and educational program plans acceptable to the district board will be included in the charter contract. And 3, agree that the essential elements of the previous charter applications will be incorporated in the resulting charter contract. And 4, agree that if the parties are unsuccessful in reaching agreement on a charter contract, the district board will open a charter application window within 15 days, and Merit will be provided the opportunity to submit an original application and accorded every opportunity to be fairly and fully considered within the standard charter application process. That is the motion.
You made the motion, or you?
That is the motion. So, do I have a motion to approve this?
I so move.
Is there a second?
A second.
Kelly?
Austin,
No.
Rivera,
Yes.
Illingworth,
Aye.
Patterson. Aye. Rusterholz.
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. President.
Move on to 11, reports. Mr. Superintendent. Yes, sir.
So sorry, there was one item that was amended to the agenda as a small item. Mr. President, that was the CORA request.
Oh. Yes, there it is.
Mr. Hillenwood, your request.
I have become aware that we have seen an explosive amount of CORA requests. I understand that since late January, there have been about 44 CORA requests up until April 10th. My understanding, Superintendent, is that there were no CORA requests in the previous year.
I'm looking to the, previous was minimal.
Okay. And so, what I would ask is, I would just like to know, when we get CORA requests in, what the CORA request is for. And then I would just ask that when material is released through CORA, that the board be copied on what's being released, so that will, I think, improve our knowledge of, what's going on
what's the, subject of discussion among the community, what is the community?
Find it on the
interested in?
website.
So I just want to make sure that the board is as informed as the rest of the public is about the materials that are out there. And one of the reasons I say that is that I have been out on public websites and I have seen material that was released there, and I was like, oh, I've never seen that before. And so we're not in a position to represent the public if we don't have the same sort of information that the public has. So I just ask that when the materials released through CORA, we receive, an email to that effect so that we can also read the same material. And that also we be updated regularly about CORA requests that are in. I think that will help us fulfill our public duties to be responsive to the concerns of the public and be informed about what's happening in the school district and in our community.
Is there any discussion on that?
On this one, Mr. President, if I may?
Yes.
The only thing that comes to mind, Mr. Illingworth, is that the board be in receipt but not be in action of those documents. And so, Miles, Brian, Tina, and Dell spent a great deal of time executing, maybe that's a better way, the policies. And so as I kind of challenge the board to remain at a policy level, that they would not be engaged at an individual core request level. And so clear communication between a board member to the president in a public forum in response to a core request would be the appropriate pathway. So if there's something out there that was concerning, that you saw in a core request, that it would not be a point of engagement, because the board really should maintain that distance to allow staff to do their jobs. That would be my only request.
Or you could just read through your own emails.
Here.
Common sense.
That being said, I don't know that I have any further concerns.
Well, right, the board is not involved in the CORA releases. We don't decide what goes out in CORA. So not asking to, obviously there's no role in the law for the board to have input in what is released in CORA. The custodian of records does that. Now, I'm simply asking to receive the same information that the public receives.
Understood.
And it's not just direct emails, of course. CORA's come in for employment contracts for various principals and things like that. They can come in for all sorts of things that don't have anything to do with the board. So I think it's very useful to be informed about what's going on out there. What are people looking for? What do people have questions about? Like I said, it is a passive thing I'm asking for, which is to be notified of the requests as they come in, and to be, have the same resources available to us that are being released to the public.
What does it take to do, they're already being released to the person who is asking for the information. Is there any additional cost or work involved to pass that on to the board of directors?
No, sir.
Is there any other discussion about the board receiving the information that's already being handed out in CORA requests? Would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I would move that in the future, any CORA request that comes in, that information is shared with the board in a reasonable fashion, and that any material that is released pursuant to CORA also be made available to the board automatically.
Electronically?
Yeah.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I second it.
Mrs. Kelly?
Austin. Roberto. Illingworth.
Aye.
Patterson.
Aye.
Westervelt.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Superintendent, sir.